one knows.
I've been saying.
The question is the name of the boat.
Mushin for a long time.
I've always called it Mushin, but no one gets it right, so
You're
that's
the
a.
captain, so I'm gonna let you know.
Yeah, right. Good morning, everyone. Alan Lee, Mushin Sportfishing out of Point Pleasant. Thanks for making this part of your morning, especially as soon as you sort of come through the show. It looks like a great show. We were here yesterday. We have a booth over in 205, and it's a great show to be at. So thanks for making tuna fishing part of your morning. Really thrilled to talk with you guys about this. Tuna fishing is what our boat does a good part of the season, usually from about June to the end of September. We're running out of Point Pleasant, Manasquan Inlet, targeting all kinds of tuna, but primarily yellowfin. And you know, one of the things, while it wasn't really part of my planned talk, we could also spend a little bit of time talking about bluefin tuna also, because as many of you know, for probably the last 8-9 years, we've been sort of extra blessed again with some really nice, yeah, exactly, with some nice bluefin runs, sometimes very close to shore. Many of you have probably been striper fishing in November and having these 400 to 600 pound bluefin blowing up next to your boat, right? But so I wasn't really planning on talking about bluefin, but we certainly can. What I thought we'd do is talk a little bit about troll, jig, chunk, and pop goes to yellowfin. You know, and if there's nothing else about today's talk, one of the things I'd like to cover with a title like that is the idea that, you know, we can catch tuna a lot of different ways. You know, as a charter owner operator, you know, been chasing these things for 4 decades. One of the things that, as a charter operator, that I don't have the luxury to do is I can't just go when I know there's a certain kind of fishing going on. You know, as a charter owner operator, I get a lot of phone calls from people looking to set up trips. People always say to me, hey Capt, I'd love to jig tuna, I'd love to pop tuna. And I say, my answer in a friendly sort of tone is, so would I, you know, because it's usually sort of the most fun way. Some people call and they say, I want a chunk tuna, and I say to them, so do I. Usually, honestly, the lowest on the list is the troll thing, you know, I mean, but my point here is that as a charter owner operator, I don't have the luxury of just picking what time of the year I go or how I'm going to try to fish for. So one of the things that we really focus on is sort of this, you know, multiple ways of trying to catch yellowfin, whether it's on a troll, chunk, jig, or pop, okay? Most of you in here run your own boats or fish on other people's boats, about half and half maybe. All right, so and certainly, you know, as we talk today, I'm going to try to address sort of both sides of it, whether you're sort of the boat owner, operator, or, you know, an angler jumping on someone's boat or jumping on a party boat. A couple of quick fun facts, and maybe I will cut the lights for this part, just so we can see it a little bit better. Many of you know this already, but you know, we're talking about some different species of tuna that are off the, you know, sort of the New Jersey, Delaware coast. We got the yellowfin, which tend to be, by and large, 40 to 80 pound fish. Bluefin, you know, we've got the schoolies, which are more of your 40 to 80 pound fish. Mediums, and also giants. And again, many of you who've been doing this, you know, we used to have a great bluefin fishery, which was more of an inshore fishery, oftentimes within 20 nautical miles of the beach. We used to have a great bluefin fishery, and then for a bunch of years we sort of lost it, and it seems to be coming back again, especially with the larger specimens, the mediums and the giants. We've got the big eye, which tend to be about 80 to 200 pound fish, and we've also got longfin, which are sort of 30 to 50 pound fish. Most of the times, bluefin are more inshore species, again, generally within 20 miles, but we do sometimes find them offshore also. Your big eye longfin and yellowfin tend to be more mid-shore or offshore. So if we're making reference to the New Jersey coast, we're usually talking about fishing about 55 out to about 100 nautical miles offshore, which coincides with about the 30, 40 fathom line. And you might remember, you know, especially for your boaters, a fathom is 6 feet. So 40 fathom line is about a 240 foot depth, excuse me, depth that you're talking about. A couple of quick things, and you guys noticed already about tuna. They're pelagics. They're considered pelagics, which mean they're mid-level fish and they're constantly moving. Tuna need to move to live. They, unlike a bluegill or a largemouth bass that can just sort of sit over a piece of muddy bottom and pump their gills, tuna need to move to keep flushing oxygen through their gills and to keep feeding and sustaining themselves. Okay, and that's going to be one of the things that, especially for folks that are boat owners and operators that are out looking for that great catch. We need to keep in mind that tuna are pelagic fish. Certainly I'm always up for sharing info. I'm a big proponent that the ocean is a big ocean, and our success as a charter operation, or what I hope to be our success as a charter operation, so much depends on working with other captains and boats to share info, because we know tuna are pelagics. We know they move sometimes 60, 70 miles in a day. So being able to share that information with other captains. I know my friend Jim Frieda, Captain Jim Frieda, is up here on the right. I'm sorry to call all the attention to you, Jim, but I know that anyone that's been tuna fishing or striper fishing knows Jim, and Jim's a great example of someone that we work with all the time, because we got to cover a lot of ocean to figure out where the fish are. So so certainly we love to be able to work with other boats to share that information, knowing that tuna are constantly moving. There's a couple of yellowfin catches from, actually I think this catch was yellowfin and bluefin, and that one on the left looked like there's an all yellowfin day. In case you don't recognize a couple of these characters in here, that fellow there, anyone have super good eyes and can identify that guy that's sort of on a knee, dark hoodie? I know the picture sort of sucks, but that's Dave DeGennaro, who runs his Philadelphia fishing show. And on the left in the yellow shirt is Nick DeGennaro, who's Dave's son and actually used to be one of our captains and mates in our operation. Nick moved to Florida and he works for IGFA now, International Game Fish Association. So we're really proud that Nick was part of our fishing program and has moved on to a bigger, better career in the fishing industry. And the guy in the back with his arms up is actually Jim Hutchinson. So they were out with us earlier, I think in August or so last year. But certainly, especially as the boat owner operator, when you're looking for yellowfin, some of the keys to it, we're talking usually more like 30 fathoms out to 100 fathoms. 100 fathoms is usually what we would traditionally consider the edge of the canyons. Certainly warmer water, in the spring or early summer, because we start, our operation, again, being a charter operation, like we don't sort of sit back and wait for people to find fish. We're out there exploring. Usually in the first week of June, we're out looking for our yellowfin. And in the spring, early summer, we like to look for temperatures around 73, 74 degrees. That's usually the lower limit of yellowfin in the early summer. Now, the reason I'm emphasizing this about early summer is that in the fall, like in September and October, we'll find yellowfin in 68-degree water. But keep in mind, in the fall, those yellowfin have been off the New Jersey coast feeding all summer, and they're able to tolerate that sort of drop in temperature. We want to look for some clean blue water, especially clean blue water temperature breaks that intersect structure. Structure meaning, changes in bottom contour. Many of you, I'm sure all of you who own and operate your own boats, you have your chart plotters, which give you all the bathymetric lines and things like that. Looking for the areas where the bathymetric lines tend to be very close or tight, because that's going to signify a sharp drop off. Looking for structure, bathymetric lines, and go left and right. Many of you who fish the Hudson Canyon area, many of you fish the Hudson area. There's an area about 10, 12 miles northeast of the Hudson where the 100 fathom line goes this way. Looks like a zig and a zag. What do we call that area? We call it the, anyone? Zigzag, exactly, right? What else would you name an area where it goes zig and zag? But that little zig and zag in that 100 fathom line is an absolutely incredible place to find some great tuna fishing because it's structure, okay? And many of you do this already, and I hope you're doing it. You're looking for bait, birds, whales, porpoise, all those sort of signs of life. When you hear over the radio or you hear your buddies talking about, we see a lot of life there. Usually it's these kinds of things that we're talking about: birds, bait, whales, porpoise, and pilot whales, okay? Most people are familiar with what pilot whales look like. They have a very distinct sort of forehead to them, very dark. If you haven't heard this already, pilot whales are your friends, okay? Where we see big congregations of pilot whales, usually within the next day or two, what do we see behind them? Big eye tuna, okay? So when we see those large congregations of pilot whales, absolutely great sign for big eyes, okay? Some of the other tips of looking for your fishery, and again, this is true whether it's yellowfin, big eye, bluefin, looking for draggers and boat concentrations, okay? Again, for the boat operators in here, I'm sure it's freaking 2026 now. Every one of you has radar, right? I mean, you probably shouldn't be going out that far without radar, but everyone has radar, and electronics can be your friend too, okay? Looking at radar, zoom your radar picture out, not only for navigational reasons, but because you want to look for concentrations of boats, okay? My good friend Jim Fried up here, he wonders how I always find him, because I look for him in a tight cluster of boats, because wherever Jim goes, people follow him. You know, so if I'm looking at my radar, I zoom it out 6 or 8 miles, I see, you know, 8 or 12 boats concentrated in one area that looks like maybe a half mile, a mile square. What are people doing there? I mean, it goes without saying, they're there for they're fishing there. Any of you guys have AIS on your boat? Okay, great. AIS, automated information system. You know, you can either send information out and or receive information in. One of the beautiful things about AIS, if you have it on your boat, is it'll tell you the information about a boat, another boat that has AIS. Most draggers or scallopers have AIS, and we like seeing those guys and gals because usually they're shucking scallops or dragging bait, things of that sort. All those kinds of cool things that mean there's probably tuna in the area. But when we pull up our AIS, or we have our AIS display on our chart plotter, we can click on the name of that boat, which is called the Kelly Marie. And you know, when we click on the information for the Kelly Marie, it might say it's a 85-foot workboat, okay? But the other thing that you can find on AIS is whether the Kelly, and I'm just making this name up, the Kelly Marie is moving or whether it's drifting at 0.2 knots. If a dragger's moving at 10, 11 knots, is it of interest to me? Not really, right? Because they're probably steaming from one place to another. If I see a workboat that's drifting at 0.3 knots, is that of interest to me? Probably. Why? Because that could be a workboat that's shucking scallops, and as they're throwing those scallop discards over the side of the boat, guess what's eating those scallop discards? Our friend the tunas, okay? So these are some little tidbits that help us find where to start. Many of you already belong to sea surface temperature services like Terrafin, ROFS, offshore satellite services, just to name a few. These are absolutely essential. Many of you who have serious marine weather on your chart plotters, one of the features that you could do is what? The sea surface temperature, live sea surface temperature, which especially when we tournament fish, I will tell you without any hesitation, it has saved our ass numerous times because, you know, sometimes we're working off of when we're pulling off, you know, temperature charts off our phone from a service. It might have been from 2-3 days ago because they haven't been able to get new shots. sometimes we get out there, we're on the water, and we're getting live Sirius XM weather, sea surface temps. I could see where there's some warm water, a nice break and things like that. And, that's the area we're gonna aim for. One other thing that, because people are asking all the time, where are we gonna get info on where to start? As a charter operation, we're really lucky because we're out there 5, 6 out of the 7 days a week. So we're oftentimes starting our next day where we left before, the trip before. But I certainly realize that not everybody has the luxury of running every day or close to every day. You might be running once every 2 weeks. 2 weeks goes by, where do you pick up? Where do you start out? One of the things that, and I have no financial interest in telling you this, but there are paid-for networks, okay? Whether it be, say for example, Canyon Runner Service, the Waterproof Services. These are just a couple of professional organizations where they have memberships and you can share information. And again, I'm going to say to you, especially if you're getting out there once every couple weeks, once every 3 weeks, maybe even once a week or more. These are great ways of getting some top-notch info from other captains who are out there doing it every day, okay? All right, any questions so far on sort of that kind of preliminary stuff? Okay, so especially with yellowfin, okay, and I'm going to focus on yellowfin for a moment. In our New York, New Jersey, Delaware area, we start our yellowfin fishing in earnest around the 1st or 2nd week of June. And we'll continue until usually at least October, although as you know, October, November, weather sort of is pretty stinky with getting out to where, the offshore canyons. Yellowfin are moving up in the spring, early summer from, offshore waters like, Hatteras, Outer Banks. They come up, they go up towards New England, and they turn around, they start heading back in the, late fall, or late summer, early fall. And what tends to change with the time of the season with yellowfin is how we fish for them. How we fish for them is what tends to change. It's the same fish, it's more or less the same water, but how we fish for them is often, the strategy is something that changes. And again, I know this word trolling for tuna is usually not the most popular among tuna fishermen, but I will tell you, as you know, many of you know, it is productive, okay? Early season, June, July, tends to be more trolling. You could troll at any time, but early season tends to be more trolling fishing because June, July, yellowfin fishing in the offshore waters, the fish have not really settled into a pattern yet. They haven't developed residency at the Triple Rex or the Texas Tower or at the hills. Many of you recognize those names, those areas. And instead, we're taking the game to them, to the fish, by going out there and trolling, whether it's an 8-rod spread, a 9-rod spread, a 14-rod spread, and we're covering some ground. And I hear a lot of people sort of scoff at trolling because it tends to be sort of an exercise for the boat and maybe the boat captain. But I would also say to you in the same sentence, I don't know, I've been chasing tuna for over 4 decades, and my heart still races every time I hear that outrigger clip that's holding one of my trolling lines clip like that, okay? All of a sudden rods start bending over and 50 class reels start screaming, and you just never forget it, and there's nothing wrong with catching tuna that way because it works. We oftentimes get multiple hookups because we're trolling. We run a 44-foot Henriques with 33-foot outriggers, so we can effectively troll 14 lines. And with 14 baits behind the boat, it helps maximize the opportunities you have of hooking up a fish trolling, and in fact multiple fish, okay? Our trolling speed is usually between 6.5 to 7 knots, and I am using the word knots on purpose because as you know, a mile per hour is different than a knot. So 6.5 7 knots is about 8 miles per hour, depending on how you have your chart plotter set. You know, we're going to first start out in the areas where we're likely to find fish, again, based on temperature charts, water color, water clarity, hopefully signs of life, whales, bait, birds. We're going to put out our spread. We're going to usually start our troll at about 6.5 to 7 knots is usually a good trolling speed. We do pay attention to sea direction. In other words, what way we are trolling, what way the ocean's waves are going, and things like that when we're trolling. Many tuna trolling sharpies will find out during the course of the day that there's a certain direction. And many of you troll stripers in here, right? Right? Striper guys, troll stripers. You ever notice that, like, some days the bass only bite if you're trolling east and west. Some days the bass only bite when you're trolling north and south. Tuna will do the same thing. There's some days where you're only going to get bites if you're trolling south or down sea. You know, and again, every day is a little different. It pays to pay attention to these things as a boat operator. We like to troll as many lines as your boat allows. And again, depending on what kind of boat you're fishing out of, outriggers, no outriggers, is going to impact how many lines you control. But we like to get as many lines out there as we can. We could probably spend the whole day on trolling patterns in terms of how to position your lures. But by and large, most of the times, if you're looking at it, if you can send a drone up to, you know, over your boat as you're trolling, the pattern of your lures in the spread behind is probably going to resemble a W or a V. Those are some of the more, you know, common day in and day out type of patterns that we use. We'll get into a little bit with some of the lures that we like to use, but most of the times color-wise, and color does oftentimes make a difference. We like trolling lures that tend to be either purple-black or all green or green or yellow. Often early in the morning, like pre-dawn, pre-sunup, or just as the sun's coming up, or conversely at the end of the day when the sun's starting to go down, we tend to use our darker colors out of the purple blacks. Whereas when the sun's up, more of the greens, yellow greens. Sometimes we'll slip in some some pink whites. If you're trolling, let's say 8, 12 lines, one of the things you could do, especially early in the day when you're still figuring things out, you might notice that you're getting bit on certain colors as opposed to other colors, okay? We oftentimes start out the day where half of our trolling spread, let's say this half of the boat, and like when I'm making this gesture, pretend I'm standing in the cockpit of the boat looking back into my trolling spread. I might make this half, maybe the port half of the trolling spread, our purple-black combos. On the other side, our yellow-green combos. And I'll probably, like, again, because we have the luxury of trolling 14 lines, we can goof around with this a little bit more. I might slip in a blue and white, pink and white, and we'll troll like that, you know, and hopefully when we come across fish, you know, out of 14 lines, we might find the purple-black keeps getting bit. So after this happens a couple times, like I'll tell you, I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but I do eventually learn. But after, you know, I keep getting bites on purple-black, this green and yellow side, I start to phase some of that green and yellow out, and I put more purple-black stuff out into there, you know. The other thing that you'll oftentimes notice is, as in trolling operations, is you might start to find that your bites are all coming on your shorter stuff, okay? Your transom lines, as opposed to the stuff that's way, way back. And again, pay attention to this stuff and make adjustments as necessary, okay? We like to use a lot of commotion in our trolling spread, so, you know, things that have a lot of, you know, bird, you know, they look like those plastic birds and things like that, okay? Oops, sorry, let me go back one. Question often comes up about trolling tackle. So I'm Shimano Pro Step, so I'll give you that sort of disclaimer before I show you some of the stuff that we use, because we are very heavy in the Shimano side of things on our boat because I pro staff for them. Some of our favorite trolling outfits are 50 class reels, okay? 50 class lever drag reels, okay? Because lever drag reels do give us the opportunity to adjust how much drag we use or don't use during the course of the fight. Most of our trolling rods are 6-foot rods, okay? Most of our trolling rods have a roller tip, okay, which is this guy up here, and ring guides. People oftentimes ask, do you need all roller guides? My opinion is no. Ring guides now are not what they were in the 70s and the 80s when we first started going offshore. They are very well constructed. I think there's probably more, my opinion is there's more downsides to having an all roller guide setup than a ring guide setup with a roller tip top. Most of our rods, if you look at like rating and capacity, are usually about 40 to 100 pound class rods. So if you read the little label on the side, most of ours are the equivalent of 40 to 100. We like to have a little bit of flex. Like most trolling offshore gear now, it's stand-up. They refer to it as stand-up tackle, which some of the hallmark features of your stand-up tackle is a shorter rear butt as opposed to a long one, a shorter one, and a long foregrip. Okay, this particular rod's one that Efficient Rods puts out. They have a huge stand here as soon as you go inside. They build a really nice rod, custom rods, with a longer foregrip. So as you're fighting the fish stand-up, you could put the butt sort of low near your crotch and sort of have the leverage of locking your left arm in and fighting it. We spool our 50 class reels with 130 braid backing, braided line, 130 pound braided backing with probably about 100 yards of mono top shot, okay? Our mono that we like to use on a 50 class reel is either 80 or 100 pound mono. And again, I'll speak from a charter point of view. I have people on the boat who are excellent anglers, and I also realistically have people on the boat who've never caught a tuna before. And by running 100 pound mono top shots, about 100 yards of it, it gives us a little bit extra insurance, okay? I will tell you, you always want to have a mono top shot on because you don't want to be handling braid. As you know, some of you probably have like 9 fingers because you're handling braid. But braid is very sharp and you don't want to be hand lining that stuff up close, okay? Drag pressure, if we're fishing 100 pound mono, if the weakest part of our line system is 100 pound mono, we usually put our strike drag, our drag at strike, at about 25% of the breaking strength of the line. So we usually do about 22 pounds of drag, which is actually a little bit less than 25%. And I'll tell you, I pro staff for Shimano, so I'm at the booths, talking with people about reels. I get so many people that come up to me and say, hey, Alan, what's the max drag of this reel? What's the max drag of a Stella 18,000, this, that, and the other thing? And you tell them, oh, it's 55 pounds. And they're like, well, do you have something that has more than 55 pounds of drag? And I'm thinking like, I don't know about you. I mean, I'm not the youngest guy around. I'm not the strongest guy around. I don't think I can hold on to 55 pounds of drag. These things have 22, 23 pounds of drag on it. And I can't tell you how many times I've seen people stumbling around the cockpit as they're fighting fish because they've got so much pressure on it. Off of New Jersey, your yellowfin fishing, your bluefin, most of your bluefin fishing, with the exception of giants, big eye tuna, longfin, 22, 23 pounds of drag is, I'm sure, and plenty, okay? Okay, any questions so far? Go ahead.
How far do you set your trolling gear when you start off in the morning?
Great question. Yep. So again, depending on how many lines you can put out on your boat, because you're going to sort of have to make a decision about how much you want to allocate for up close, how much you want to allocate for out far. Tuna are not afraid. Well, let me actually sort of ask a rhetorical question maybe. What's your best teaser? What's your best attractant when you're out trolling tuna?
The boat.
The boat, good. So Point here being, tuna are generally not afraid of a trolling boat, moving boat. The engine noise, the hum of the wheels is actually something that is often attractive to tuna. They come in and they look. So bringing it back to your question here, we are not afraid to put lures relatively close to the boat. Some of our closest trolling lines, lures, are about 40 feet, not 40 yards, 40 feet behind the transom of the boat. Some of our furthest, it's about 225, 250 feet, not yards, feet, okay? And again, depending on your boat, how much room you have, how much room you don't have, you're gonna wanna sort of play with what you put between 40 feet and out to about 250 feet behind your boat. That sort of answer the question?
Yeah.
Okay,
40
super.
feet being the minimum, the closest. Okay.
Yep, and again, it doesn't have to be a hard and fast rule. I mean, like basically a lot of times, we do it by eye. I mean, of course, you know, I get the luxury of fishing the same boat, you know, pretty much every day. I know sort of where the wake of the boats, you know, my boat is. And for us, it's usually about 40 feet. You know, we'll talk a little bit about positioning lures in the pattern. But, you know, our closest is usually about 40 feet. And in fact, some days, that's what catches everything. And there's some days, you know, maybe part of it is, it happens maybe the school of fish that's, you're fishing that day. Maybe these are the kind of fish that are extra aggressive. They want to come in, they check things out at the 40-foot line, you know, 40 feet behind your boat, as opposed to those things that are on your long rigger 250 feet behind you. And again, these are the adjustments that your top tuna captains should try to make. If they start to see that your short lines, your 40-foot lines are getting hit, maybe your mid-range lines, 60, 80 feet back are getting hit, move your spread up. You know, it's like a football game. You know, you know, coaches in a football game are constantly making adjustments, and you as a fishing coach, fishing captain, are doing the same thing. You know. Yeah. Okay. Go ahead.
What speed? I know you said 6 to 7 knots for Yellowfin. For bluefin, what are your slowing it down?
Great question. Yeah, bluefin we usually knock it down a little bit. Most of our, if we're trolling for more like schoolies, you know, your smaller bluefin, we usually keep it around 6 to 7 also. If we're fishing for bluefin, I'm sorry, if we're fishing for giants, let me say that again. If we're fishing strictly for giants or targeting giants, we often slow it down to about 5.5 knots. I don't know if it's a mental thing for us as boat operators, but yeah, you think these giants are like, gosh, if they're like 600 pounds, they gotta be like, I mean, you know, you look at a 600-pound guy, like, they can't be as fast as like a nimble guy like, you know, like you, like, you know, you're chasing 600-pound bluefin, you gotta give them a little bit of a break, you know, so you slow the boat down a little bit, you know. And again, the thing I'd say to you more than anything else, aside from a hard and fast rules, you know, if you're noticing something's working that day, you know, go with it. If you're out trolling and you're one of 12 boats working an area and eight of the 12 boats are hooked up, and you're the one that's not hooked up, like, you know, and believe me, that sometimes that's me. I'm sometimes that boat that's not hooked up. What am I doing? I'm going to talk to the other boats. Hey, what are you trolling at? And you know, you know, Jim Frieda might come back to me and say, you know, we're trolling at about 7 knots, and I'm like, what am I doing? You know, why am I pulling my lures at 5 knots? Jim's pulling at 7. He's like hooked up, you know, 7 times already today. You know. So you know those kinds of things you want to keep in mind. Okay.
Your spread distance, like
That's
for
another thing.
species?
Absolutely. Well, bluefin. I think again, generally speaking, bluefin are either going to be really close or really far back. Many of you who I'm sure there's many of you in this room who have been chasing these giants late in the fall or even in the spring, and we often talk about the way back, which has gotten this really nice acronym of what, WWB, way back. And what does way back mean? It means different things for different people. I know some of the top local giant bluefin tuna guys that I work with, way back means 300 to 100 yards, okay? That's like 900 feet, 1,000 feet. Certainly, as you can imagine, if you're trolling way backs, 300-400 yards back, you're not going to troll 14 lines. In fact, many, you know, even big boats, they're trolling 3, maybe 4 lines, and they stagger. So it might be like 1,200 feet, 1,000 feet, 800 feet, 600 feet. So that this way, and you know, for you guys who've done this before, you know, as you're turning the boat, you're trolling, you know, it affects your positioning and things like that. Okay, so let's look at some of the lures we like to use. I'm sure, you know, many of these look familiar to you. Basically your spreader bar, but in recent decades, a couple of great companies have really helped us tweak spreader bars, because as you know, the spreader bar, the concept is, you know, there's multiple lures, usually all of them except for the last one. These are hookless. They have no hook in it. It's usually this last one in the back that's trailing behind it has a hook. But Sterling Tackle, Chatter are just among 2 of the companies that have developed sort of a wide tracker or side tracker, which has a keel, a little plastic keel in this lead bird that helps veer your whole spreader bar out to the side where the water is a lot cleaner. As you know, right behind your boat when you're trolling, there's prop wash. Those bubbles that are part of the prop wash often interfere with the tuna's ability to see what's really there. When Steve of Sterling first sort of introduced the wide tracker, I'm going to be perfectly candid and upfront. I was a little bit unsure as to how well it may or may not work. So Steve sent me a pair of them to try. And let me put it this way. So I troll 14 lines off my 44 Henriques. I put 1 pair of wide trackers out. So 2 out of my 14 lines that first season were wide trackers. And I can honestly tell you, those wide trackers caught about 50 to 60% of all of our fish. So, again, I'm not the smartest guy, but if you only have 2 wide trackers out of 14 possible baits, and they're catching almost half of your fish, it's beyond chance. I mean, there's something that's really great about the concept of whether it's Sterling Tackle's wide tracker, Chatter's side tracker, but the idea is you're moving your trolling lure out into usually the side of the boat, outside of the prop wash. And that's sort of magic some days. Yes, sir?
Do you like bars with more birds on them or more squid on them?
Great question. In terms of selecting spreader bars, we can go a lot of different ways with this. Aside from questions as to like the color, because we could probably spend a lot of time talking about that. If we're trolling in areas where there's likely to be a lot of sand eels and mackerel, okay, which tend to be your inshore areas. So for you bluefin guys, if you're trolling the mud hole, you're trolling Barnegat Ridge, these areas where it tends to be a lot of sand eels. I like trolling, you know it's referred to as like a machine lure, okay, meaning like a bullet style lure, because it's going to mimic a sand eel or a mackerel better. Generally speaking, when we're trolling the canyons, we're more likely to be trolling over schools of squid. And how do we know that? Aside from like what we're reading on the fish finder, a lot of times when we're landing fish, one of the first things I tell the mates is gut the fish, because we want to see what's in its gut. Or sometimes if we're really lucky, we land the fish and things like puking, stuff out. So if we see there's more squid, then we're going to want to opt for like a squid type lure on our spreader bar. But you also asked another question about birds on your bar. So this is just, again, one of many models that Sterling has out. This one has 1 bird up front. Many of you have seen, well, even this one over here, this Chatters, I think that's, I forgot the exact model number, but it has 4 birds on the branch lines, 1 in the middle. The general rule of thumb that I would say with how much commotion you want to have some commotion, it's great. But my experience and what I would go to day in and day out is if it's a really calm flat day, don't go overboard with making commotion, because it's at some point it becomes almost unnatural. If you were like put yourself in the mind of a fish, you want to have some commotion, but not to the point where it's like ridiculous. I mean, like, and I think we've all been out there on super flat days. You see like a 55-foot flybridge sport fisherman trolling, but the trolling spread they have behind them makes a bigger wake than the boat because there's so many birds on it and things like that. I don't have a hard and fast rule, but I think there is a point of diminishing returns where if there's too many birds on it, it starts to,
Make too much of a splash.
yeah. In fact, one of the things that we like to do, especially on really flat, calm days, which of course is, hey, those are the days we like to get out there, right? I mean, who wants to go out there when it's like true 4 to 6 footers or 3 to 5 footers and you're getting your teeth knocked out? But a lot of like the smaller baits, like for example, Chatter puts out like a micro machine bar. They're smaller baits, sort of a more finesse presentation. It's a really nice thing to have and to use, So, but that's a great question about the birds, because you want to think about it, So, of course, the solution to it, and you don't want to tell your wife or girlfriend this, is what do? Right, you got to buy some of everything, So now you really know I pro staff for Sterling and Chatter also, because, I would tell you to buy some of everything, But that's a good question, okay? Yep. Some of the things that I'm sure many of you have seen and used these things, Joe Shoot, which happens to be a brand name, a trolling head like that, with a ballyhoo. Many of you in recent years have seen how we've gone to rubber tails, like the Ron Z tails, magic tails. These are just some different manufacturers of rubber tails that we troll behind the Joe Shoots that are a lot easier to do than ballyhoo, which is up here it's a frozen bait. Melton, which is a company out in California, they have a line of cherry jets, which we love. I don't know why, never really seemed to gain much traction in the Northeast, but Melton cherry jets we find were great. Green machines, for many of you who have been fishing since the 70s and stuff, green machines are what we used to use. This thing, the Island Sail Lure, which is a really sort of, in a way, it's almost like a small micro Joe Shoot, is actually one of our favorite offshore yellowfin lures. Again, ballyhoo, which is a natural bait. Generally in tuna fishing, it gets trolled as part of a trolling head, like a Joe Shoot head. And then these things on the right, the trolling plugs, which are large plugs, but they're also large lipped plugs. And many of you know already, with the larger lip, it digs down deeper. So Rapala has like a countdown 30, countdown 25. Bomber has a version. There's Yozuri, Nomad. I'm sorry, thanks. Yeah, I knew I was leaving one out. Just some different names of manufacturers that put the trolling plugs out. These are designed to be, run for tuna. And the nice thing about trolling plugs is it gives a different dimension to our trolling spread. So far, a lot of what we talked about are things that sort of skip along the surface or maybe troll a foot or two below the surface. But these trolling plugs are made to troll about 25 to 30 feet below the surface, which is very helpful and important because, as tuna sometimes come up from the depths, because these tuna, most yellowfin are probably cruising 60, 80 feet below the water surface. These trolling plugs are oftentimes one of the first things they'll see. They really became popularized probably about 15, 18 years ago at this point. Been a lot of advances. Shimano, who again, full disclosure, I pro staff for, just yesterday released a new line of offshore trolling lures that looks very promising. Okay?
Same speed on the plugs?
Yes. One of the challenges with trolling plugs down deep at 6 to 7 knots is that sometimes they get all berserk and they start trolling left, right, and jumping out of the water and things like that. But we keep it, usually the trolling plugs are for our boat, 1 or 2 of the 14 baits, lures that are out there, so it does get pulled at the same speed. Give you a little tidbit or a little tip about what we do, again, because we typically include 1 or 2 plugs in our trolling spread day in and day out. On our boat, we have 2 dedicated plug trolling rods. Remember I said to you, trolling outfit, our trolling outfit usually has 100 yards of 100-pound mono top shot. On our plug rods, we cheat a little bit, and we only put about 10 feet of mono on it, because as you know, mono is much thicker than braid, and the thinner braid on our plug trolling rods helps get the plug down deeper, and it seems to help with not getting the eye of the on the lip here turned, which then makes the whole plug come shooting out. Yeah. So again, we know day in and day out we're trolling 1 or 2 plugs, so we have a couple of dedicated plug rods.
How far back?
Our plugs, we usually just put about 100, 120 feet of line out for starters. And for our boat, we troll it on the corner, one or both of the transom corners. And we find that there's definitely a point of diminishing returns. If you put 300 feet of line out on a plug, first of all, people are gonna stop talking to you because no one wants to reel in a plug with 300 feet of line out there, but it doesn't seem to dig any deeper. So we find that most of the times these guys perform best about 100, 120 feet of line out, the plugs. Is there another question?
No, one of the tips that I learned from right down in Carolina is, particularly for water fishing, is put a trolling weight in front of these.
Yeah.
And that kind of anchors it a little bit
Yep.
from the walking.
Yes, that's a great point. Yeah, put that ahead of the plug. Yep, good point. Okay, let's go on to a couple other things here. And you know what, we're gonna have to quit. Well, how about this? I'll just mention a couple of these other things, because I don't want to run into, I think we have another speaker here in a couple of minutes, I think, so I don't want to be rude to them. Chunking is certainly another very effective technique for yellowfin fishing. In our area, chunking tends to be a later season thing. Usually, we used to do it in mid-August. Just from the last, say, 10 seasons. I don't think mid-August really works much. It tends to be more of a September, October thing. We could use the same gear as that trolling gear, but again, because I pro staff for Shimano, I'm going to try to sell you even more stuff than you need. So one of our favorite go-tos is like a Talica 20. It's a lever drag reel. We spool it up with braid, but we also, again, do a top shot. With chunking, because you're going to be holding the gear most of the time, we go with something lighter. Something like a Talica 20 is going to be plenty. We use a slightly lighter rod. This is about a 40 to 80 pound class rod. These happen to be, Kevin Bogan custom rods. But basically we're paying, it's light, but especially if you guys are fishing a private boat or something like that, you have the luxury of fighting your fish as long as you want. It's not like you're on a party boat or something like that where you gotta, you start to get dirty looks at other people. With chunking, we're drifting or anchoring, you're feeding back, chunks to attract them, and then you're putting a hook bait back.
Is it okay if the chunk is frozen, like right out of the?
You should let it thaw. Yeah, frozen chunks. Frozen chunks usually don't drift as well, and then also when they bite it sort of doesn't quite feel right. Tuna jigging and popping are certainly a couple of the other really popular ways of catching them. Jigging tends to be, when we know the fish are more concentrated, okay? Because a good way of losing friends and crew on boat is to take them out jigging when there's no tuna in the area, because they jig their arms off and they ask you at the end of the day, why did you take me out for that miserable day of working my shoulder to oblivion? So, jigging and popping tend to be when your yellowfin are more concentrated. which for our New Jersey area is usually mid-July through the end of the season in October. You can use conventional gear. One of our favorites is with the Shimano line on our boat is the OSHA Jigger 4000. It's a nice big, narrow spool reel, and usually about a six and a half foot jigging rod. Conventional if you like. You can go with spinning.
Is it a custom handle?
No, this is actually the stock. This is the stock OSHA Jigger 4000. And then the other thing that's become really popular in recent decades is tuna popping, where we're using these, large poppers. It's just an example. Feel free to pass this around. We're talking about like an 8 or 9 inch popper. This one up here on the screen is a small lure company, Micros popper, but we're using long rods, like an 8-foot rod usually. Very heavy duty spinning reel with popping, as you can imagine, because you're casting the fish. It's an exclusively spinning reel kind of situation. Usually our spinning reels are, 80-pound braid backing with a short section, maybe 12 to 14 feet of fluorocarbon on the top, which is our top shot. One of the absolute things I would tell you, if you're in the market for a popping outfit, one of the most important things is the connection between your braid line and your top shot. And the two knots that tend to work are your FG knot or your PR knot. YouTube is an excellent tutorial on how to tie those things. That's really sort of, those two knots are pretty much the knots to go with when you're popping. So, I know we got about, why don't we say like 5 minutes for question and answer? I don't want to run into our next guy, so yeah.
What would you say the minimum gram size rod you should use?
Okay.
for popping?
Yeah, so I guess when you're talking about gram, you're talking about usually like that 200, 300,
Right,
400.
some of them,
Yeah.
the heavier ones, the guy is a little rough on the back.
Yeah, so I think there's always a trade-off. And again, I'm sort of in the tackle business also, where I know a lot of people get excited because some company has introduced this like super X29 Magnum giant earth pulling rod that you can unearth trees with. I don't like getting beat up when I fish. To me, fishing should be fun. So I like rods that have a little bit of give to them. Okay. This is a grappler. It's an 8'2". It's a grappler XH, which is a Shimano product. And this is a sample of what we'd like to have. I don't know that I can tell you a hard and fast rule, but some of it is personal preference at the end of the day. But obviously you want a rod that's going to be able to cast your heavy poppers. You want to be able to set the hook. But you also don't want to get beat up, to the point where, some of these rods you see, they're so stiff that it's basically, a broomstick that's connected between you and the fish. If you're fishing a private boat, you have some opportunity to fight the fish, use it, Jim, we run into our next person probably?
You got a couple minutes.
Okay, all right. Other questions? Go ahead.
What's the weight of the leader you're using in your
Okay.
popping rod?
Yep, good question. We usually use 100-pound fluoro for our top shot on our popping rods. Some people use wind-ons because they're a little simpler to put on. Again, we usually do an FG, I'll come clean. My mate, because I sort of suck at tying them. FG or PR knots, those are, but usually it's 100-pound fluoro.
Will you spend the extra money on the gold CR, or will you go with the regular?
I don't want to diss people who are trying to sell the gold, but I think the regular works. Yeah.
On your jigging rod, do you always do that fine?
Oh yeah, that's a great question. Let me hey. Yeah, Jim, just tell me when I need to quit. Jim, one of the things we love to use on our jigging outfits is this Depth Hunter multicolored line. There's different trade names and things like that, so don't have to go too crazy over what company you use. But the nice thing about this multicolored line is usually it changes color every 25 feet or 30 feet. And when you're jigging, it's nice to know, because again, jigging is usually targeted fishing. Your fish are maybe 60 feet down or 80 feet down. you know, by knowing, you know, if I'm on the bridge and I'm reading fish 80 feet down, I'll turn around and tell everybody in the cockpit, hey, fish are holding around 80 feet. So you want to maybe drop it down 100, which if this changes every 25 feet, you know, it's a 4 color changes. Drop it down, start working from there. How about one more question? I don't want to run to our next speaker.
Would you recommend the triple Rex area to start off yellowfin fishing?
So triples are certainly a great area, but again, fish do have tails. I'm not trying to be funny or sarcastic. They do have tails, and don't feel like that's the only spot to go to. I'm sure many of you who've been out to the triple Rex in July, August, there's about 120 boats there, about 120 boats at the hills, and there's, you know, there's a lot of boats out there. You don't have to fish in a crowd to catch tuna. Some of our best catches, we're glad to say, have been out and away from the fleet a little bit. Our booth's at 205 there. You certainly feel free to come by and talk to me, George, Darrell, John, whoever it is. Okay, thanks so much.